And welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you are indeed in the chat. Welcome everyone. We are live from London, live from Brompton Cemetery. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me properly. It is just before 6 p.m. UK time. Welcome, Sanson. And I can see the numbers and I can see the chat, so we should be all good. Perfect. Thanks for letting me know, Tish. Hi, Martin. Nice to see you here. Before anything else, most of you know the drill by now. We're gonna test the microphone because we don't want to be hearing any background noises or any wind. And I've got a few cables, so we're just gonna try. I'm gonna tap the microphone 3 times. Let me know in the chat that you've heard the tapping. And welcome again, Roberta, and everyone that I've just seen in the chat earlier. Let me know if you've indeed heard the tapping. If anyone was completely new to me, if you are live with us right now, we'll start in 10 minutes. If you're watching the replay in the next few weeks or months, if you want to skip the next 10 minutes, if you wanted to go straight into the walking tour, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes, probably 9 now. Welcome, Caroline. You've heard it. Perfect. And welcome, Danette. Nice to see you here. You've heard it, Sandy. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me know. If at any point through the tour you start hearing some wind noises, do let me know in the chat. It could be one of the connections in the cable that got loose or anything. And welcome, Cheryl. Welcome anyone that just joined. We've got, let me tell you, 8 minutes to start, 8 minutes before we go. And we are in Brompton Cemetery. Let me give you a glimpse of the view. It's a lovely weather, so we are lucky. It's been raining a bit on and off today, but hopefully we'll be able to dodge the rain, so it's always a bit nicer. And it's not too warm. I mean, it's warm enough, but it's not like, you know, boiling hot. It's a bit overgrown at the moment, the nature, which is quite cool. I actually like it this way. From Amsterdam to Brompton is a 5-second flat. What? From Amsterdam to Brompton is a 5-second flat? I don't get it. Hi Matthew, welcome. Nice to see you here. That's how long your grass was. Well, it was the same in my garden last time I did have a garden in Clapham Junction. Because none of us wanted to buy a new how do you call them? What do you call them? Mon cutter. What do you call them? Mon lower. Well, whatever, you know what I mean. And we've got a few aircrafts coming down. I guess they're on their way to Heathrow Airport. Oh, all right, I see. You were with Mark in Amsterdam. That makes sense. I've got a little. I can't show you, but there we go. I had a fly, a little fly on the screen on the chat. They're gone now. Welcome, Satyam, and welcome, Ronnie. Welcome everyone that just joined. We still have a few minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. If any of you in the chat happen to be completely new to me, by all means, do come and say hello. It's always nice to have a few newbies. If you are watching us live, of course, if you're watching the replay, you can always say hello in the comments section. Let me tell you how long we've got. Oops. Ah! Didn't mean to do that. Crap. I've just zoomed in into my face. Hold on, bear with me. We still... there we go. If you've always dreamt about seeing my nose huge on your TV screens, now it happened. So I was going to check the time. That's what I wanted to do. 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes. So it is nearly 6 p.m. UK time. And as you can see, it's still very bright. It's this time of the year when the sun is not going down until about 9 p.m. really. I don't know if you can hear much of the nature, but I can hear a few birds in the background. Hi, Katie. And Diane is here. Nice to see you here, Diane. And Michelle is here as well. Nice to see you, Michelle. So we only have a few minutes to go now. Let me stand up already. So if anyone was completely new to me, I'm Natalie. I'm sure most of you would have already spotted my accent. But if any of you hadn't, if you were still trying to place it, no, I'm not from Liverpool. 3 minutes to go. Hi, Satyam. I've not actually seen you, Satyam, but I'm guessing you're here. Let's see, 2 minutes. You're the tortoise called Michelle. Well, that's a good name. It's fairly quiet today in the cemetery, so that's gonna be nice. And welcome, Emma. Nice to see you here. Welcome to Brompton Cemetery, one of the magnificent 7. Oh, Michelle it was called. And welcome back, Pisas. Right, let me see if it is time yet. 1 minute to go, 1 minute. We might see a few furry friends today. There are a lot of people walking their dogs, of course, but also quite a few squirrels. And it is officially time to start. It is 6 p.m. Welcome everyone. Without further ado, let me flip this camera around and let's go. So we are in the beautiful Brompton Cemetery. A lovely place to come for a walk, a lovely place for the living as well as the dead. And let me show you. So for the first part of the tour, we might see a few names that some of you might recognize if you followed a lot of my tours before. And this grave over here, not the most glamorous from the outside, but this is Sir Henry Cole. Let me show you. Let me know in the chat if you remember why we spoke about Henry Cole in the past. I'll show you his name. It's written down here. We talked about him at least twice. We talked about him in my Christmas light tour, and we talked about him when I did a little video in Sheer in Surrey, because we saw a house where he used to live. Do you remember what he's famous for? I'm sure some of you do. Let us know in the chat if you do. Otherwise, I'll tell you. But I don't want to tell you too quickly, because very often there's a bit of a delay with the chat. Well, I'll show you. He's famous for inventing the Christmas cards. After the penny stamp was invented, before the penny stamp, it was the receiver of a letter that used to pay. So people wouldn't send tons of unwanted letters. But after that, when they invented the stamp, anyone could send a letter or a card to anybody. And the first Christmas card from Henry Cole is this one. So that's a representation of his family with some representation of Christmas charity on the side, and so that's a print that he sent to a lot of his family, and that kind of created the fashion of sending Christmas cards to everyone. He was very much involved as well in the creation of the V&A, the Victorian and Albert Museum. Now, let me turn around. There's another gentleman right behind me that you might have heard of in my tours as well. Let me show you. I'm sure you'd remember this one. This is the grave of William Terrace. William Terrace was a Victorian actor. He was a bit like the Hugh Grant of the time. He was on many plays. He was a stage actor at the end of the 19th century, and sadly today he's actually more remembered for his afterlife than for his life. He's actually very much remembered because he's been hunting, allegedly, Covent Garden station, as well as different areas in Covent Garden as well. He was famously murdered at the back of the Adelphi Theatre in Covent Garden by another artist called Arthur Prince that stabbed him in the back and in the front. And when William was taken to his resting room upstairs, as he died, he famously said, "I'll be back." And back he was. He has been seen in Covent Garden Station for many years. And also, even at the very timing of his passing, so his wife that lived in a manor miles away, apparently at the very same time, so he would have died about 7, just before the play actually, they were waiting for him on stage. It is said that his wife was at home, no idea, of course, of the tragedy that was just unfolding. Apparently, his dog went ballistic. He was barking and barking away, and his wife was looking at the dog, and she was like, "What does he see that I don't see?" Kind of like if the dog had seen a ghost or something. So, doggy friend here, and. William Terrace is known for his paranormal activity. And at the time, he was very, very well known. Even Queen Victoria, she actually sent a letter of condolences to the poor widow. So very, very famous name. Oops. Let's go down this way to go towards the main door. At this time of the year, the cemetery usually closes at 8, so that's quite cool. You can come a bit later in the afternoon. And a lot of people use it almost like a park, because, you know, we are in Chelsea. In Chelsea, not all of the green open spaces are actually public. You know, you have a lot of those little squares, you know, that are private. You know, you need a key, you need to be a local resident. You know, like you might have seen in the movie Notting Hill, you know, those little squares in between that you need to access with a key. When you see, you know, Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts climbing. So this type of squares. So they are not right here. You don't have that many parks. So this one is very much used as a park as well. And actually, you can see that it's being used by the living as well, because by the gate down there, there's a defibrillator. So I think for most of the residents, it's a bit too late, but for those of us that are still alive and enjoying the cemetery as a park, it could be useful. If you guys scared me in the chat, and if I had a heart attack or anything, it could be used. Anyway, this gentleman you probably recognize as well, Jon Snow. Not the Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, of course, Jon Snow, the epidemiologist. We talked about him in Soho, really, when we talked about cholera. Jon Snow was, today we'll call him an epidemiologist. The term is a bit anachronistic, really. He was a physician, and he is mainly known for his research on cholera, because at the time people believed that cholera was being spread by the smells. See, that's the defibrillator there. So yeah, they believed that you'd breathe in, you'd smell a bad smell, and then you'd be contaminated. That's called the miasma theory. And for many years, you know, that was the same with the plague. People believed that you'd smell the bad smell, a rotten smell, and that you'd be contaminated. And Snow was actually convinced that cholera was waterborne. And there was an epidemic of cholera in the mid-19th century in Soho. One street was particularly affected. And Snow very bravely went and knocked at every door. And he asked them, where did they get their water from? Because Snow believed that the cholera epidemic was coming from one water pump in Soho. And he went to knock at, we've got a little squirrel friend here. He went to knock at doors, and for example, he went to ask at a brewery, the Lion Brewery, where no one had died of cholera. He went to ask them, where do you get your water from? And the brewery, they said, well, we don't drink water, mate. I mean, we've got free beer. Why would we drink any water? Then he went on and knocked at a door where he knew an old lady had died in Hampstead, so far away from Soho. So he wanted to find out why. It turned out that she used to live in Soho, and she had a favorite pump. You know, at the time, people had a favorite water pump because they all tasted slightly different, you know. So apparently our loved ones, they used to go down to Soho to get the water for her on back up to Hampstead. So that's how we could eventually prove that the cholera was coming from that very pump. We now believe that it was because of a baby called Baby Louis. So you had basically feces in the water. But would you believe it took another 30 years? So although he managed to get the sanity board to remove the handle from the pump so people couldn't drink the water anymore, that stopped the epidemic. But it took another 30 years for people to be convinced, because they were so deeply believing in the miasma theory that they couldn't be convinced that quickly. Even some influential people like Florence Nightingale and stuff, they still believed in the miasma theory, would you believe? Anyway, here is another famous lady that we also mentioned in some of my tours, Emmeline Pankhurst. Emmeline was a suffragette, of course. although she might have pronounced it suffragette, because she was like, we're gonna get the vote. So she was a campaigner for women's vote at the beginning of the century. When I say the suffragettes, not to be confused with the suffragists. The suffragists, they were ladies and gentlemen, there were a few as well, that were peacefully campaigning for ladies' vote. The suffragettes, they were, in today's definition of the term, you know what I mean, people that are ready to create an act of terror. Because they would use arson, they would use stuff like that. They were lucky not to kill anyone apart from themselves. Violence, really. And anyway, Emmeline, you probably know a lot of her life anyway already, because we spoke about her before. But would you believe the monument was created by a very interesting sculptor? They were known as Miss Julian Phyllis Allen, although they were actually born Miss Eva Dorothy Allen. But you know, at the time, being a sculptor was not, it was not exactly a job for ladies. Queen Victoria's daughter, she was also a sculptor, and Queen Victoria was not massively impressed. So in this type of art, you know, if you wanted to make it in the sculpting industry, it was a bit easier if you had a man's name. She didn't change our pronouns. You know, today it's all about pronouns. She still went as a she. She still went as Miss. And she was a lesbian, so she probably wasn't the girliest of ladies anyway. She lived a very long time. She lived until the age of 103 years old. She fought in both world wars. But yeah, she lived her life as Julian Phyllis Allen instead of being called Eva, because she wanted to make it in the world of sculpting. We still have a bit of that today, you know, like for example, J.K. Rowling, when she published Harry Potter, she went as J.K. because she believed it was easier, you know, when people didn't know about your gender. So sadly, it can still be a disadvantage today in some profession to have a girly name. Anyway, let's go and see a time machine. The cemetery is allegedly home to the first and probably the only time machine in the world. Is it though? Well, we don't know because no one's got the key. It is the monument of a lady called Anna Courtroy. She was a Victorian lady. She was a socialite. She had 3 daughters, probably buried with her. We don't actually know because no one's got the key. She was working with an older gentleman, and he probably was the father of the girls, but they never married. And then I think she ended up with his fortune when he passed away. And she had some friends. You know, at the time in Victorian times, that's the time when people started to be absolutely fascinated with Egypt. People would describe themselves as Egyptologists. Some people even called it Egyptomania. And she had a friend called Joseph Bonamy that was potentially a charlatan, and he was an Egyptologist. He was fascinated by Egypt, and some believed that he had cracked the codes or the way of teleportation and time travel. He wasn't alone. He was with another guy called Sam Warner that was pretending to be some kind of a weapon engineer. He could apparently attack a ship from the distance, but he had done it in front of the Prime Minister, Robert Peel. So yeah, interesting gentlemen, the both of them. So this is the monument, but let me show you the creator first. So this is Joseph Bonamy. The monument is quite sad because when you look at the date, when you look at the kids, he's lost 4 children in the space of a week. I mean, it's just, you know, today to be losing that many kids, you know, you'd need a tragedy like a plane crash or something. But at the time, you know, it happened. Scarlet fever or whatever, you know, those epidemics, they were so violent, so quick. And this is Anubis. So this is the protector of the dead. So you can see their interest for Egypt, really. Now let's go and take a look. Oh, sorry, I'm just stepping back. Yeah, let's go and take a look at the time machine. Well, we don't know what's inside. It might just be for teleportation. Who knows? We don't really even know how it started. But that's the gorgeous monument. So that's Anna Courtesan. Thanks ever so much, Diane. That's very much appreciated. If any of you also dropped me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, I don't see them live, but that's equally appreciated. I'll show you. So that's the key. That's the key that no one has. So we don't really know what's inside, and that's what that adds to the mystery, really. And you can see those little symbols. They're all very mysterious. They're not quite hieroglyphics, but they look almost like a secret code and stuff. So that probably plays into the legend. Cool. Let's go down this way. We're not gonna go all the way, but I saw an interesting grave earlier. I'll show you. You know, sometimes you wonder, why is your eye attracted to a monument in particular? So he's not dead, he's sleeping. But look, it says, of the Chase, Clapham Common. The Chase is a street. I lived on the Chase for many years. So he could have lived in my home. It's a long street. There are quite a few old Victorian houses on the street, but we actually, when we lived there, we had a couple of ghosts. They were not called Gilbert. One was Margaret, one was Oscar. We had named them. But, you know, why did my eye get attracted by that monument? Maybe he did live in my house. Who knows? And it's a bit odd for him to be buried here anyway, because, I mean, the majority of people buried here would be from Chelsea and its area, but because they have some burial grounds in Clapham as well. But anyway, interesting. And talking about interesting monuments, let me show you another one here that caught my eye. I'm not too sure what the illustration or the engraving is of. I'll show you. That's what do you see there? I was looking at it earlier. It looks like someone giving food to an empty chair. If you get the reference, let me know. I don't understand. I don't know if they're giving food or something else, or if they're just begging, but it looks like they're begging to an empty chair. And let me show you another monument down here as we go. So we have about 205,000 people buried here. Not quite as many monuments, of course, because a lot of people would have been buried in communal graves as well. This beautiful lion, it's for a gentleman that was, he was a bodyguard of George IV. You bet he was one of my ghosts and just saying hi. Yes, I think he was. Even if he wasn't, he would have been my neighbor. Well, 200 years earlier, but still. Anyway, there's another lady I want to tell you about. We're not going to go all the way to her grave because she doesn't really have any. She was in a communal grave. When we say a communal grave, it's not the same as a pauper's grave. A pauper's grave, it's really when you have no money whatsoever and the parish has to pay for you. A communal grave, you pay, but you don't pay much. With a communal grave, usually they used to bury you. They wouldn't quite close it yet. They'll bury another 8 or 10 people on top of you. So they wouldn't close the grave for a week, and then that's it, So you'd be buried with like 10 strangers. But a normal communal grave, you'd pay for that. The pauper's grave, that's a different story. That's for people that really had no money whatsoever. So this lady, her name was Harriet Wilson. She was born Dubochet, not French, Swiss. And she was a courtesan in Regency time. By the way, not to be confused, so she was Harriet Wilson, not to be confused with Sarah Wilson. Sarah Wilson was another lady from the same period, actually. She was a very early scammer. She was a Regency scammer, quite an interesting lady as well. She had been deported to America, before to send criminals to Australia. They were actually sent to the States for a short time. And as she got to America, she managed to convince people that she was the sister of Queen Charlotte. So she was invited at people's places and stuff, and she had a lovely time in America. So not the same. So that's Sarah Wilson. The lady that's buried here, it is Harriet Wilson. So she was a courtesan. A courtesan is a sex worker, but it's a high-end sex worker. The main difference is that a courtesan would usually only have one customer at the same time. They were almost like the official paying mistress. And they were often a little bit more highly educated because they'll have to be able to hold a conversation or go to the theater or whatever it might be. One day you're going to come across a photo of me in the 18th century. Well, I might have been reincarnated a few times since, but yeah, I might have a look-alike, a dead ringer, quite literally. Anyway, so she was a courtesan, and she had some customers that were very high profiles, potentially George IV. Potentially the Duke of Wellington as well, that's pretty sure, Arthur Wolseley. And she decided, as she got to the age of 40, she didn't have that many customers anymore. And she decided to publish her memoirs. So they're still available to buy, the memoirs of Harriet Wilson's. She actually published it in a series of cliffhanging chapters, and before to actually publish, she would send a copy of the manuscript to whoever was going to be outed, and she would blackmail them. So they'll say, okay, you pay me £20 a year, and I don't publish your name. We believe that George IV actually paid up. Or you pay 200 now, and I'll never publish your name. The Duke of Wellington allegedly said, "Publish and be hanged." So very interesting lady. The style, the life story of courtesans, that was already a popular genre at the time. So a few ladies had started to do that. People at the time they started to be very interested into the lives of those ladies. Anyway, before we go much further, I've got two interesting people here. This one was an early Victoria Cross holder from World War I. You can see a Zeppelin. I think he was the first one that managed to destroy a German aircraft from the sky. Sadly, he died very, very soon after. I think 10 days later it was. So that's a war hero. And another one here. We don't really know much about their life, but their name is Nutkins. Now, there's a lady that allegedly spent a lot of time in the cemetery when she was a young girl, Beatrice Potter. And Nutkins, let me show you Nutkins. It is a squirrel. It is said, I wanna stress that Beatrice never confirmed it, but it is said that some of the names of the characters were actually inspired by gravestone in the cemetery. They found a list of at least 4. Beatrice Potter never actually confirmed it, but she might have found the name Nutkin from this very headstone over here. If you're not from the UK, you might not know of Beatrice Potter. I didn't really. Somehow, those children books have not really made it into France. They might have recently with the recent cartoons and stuff, but when I was a child, we didn't really read Beatrice Potter. I guess you probably did in America. Did you? Did you know about her in the US and in Canada? Now, talking about Beatrice Potter, so you've got Nutkin the squirrel, but you also have is it Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny. Check out what I got in my change the other day. I've been checking my change a lot because I want to find the king. I haven't found the king yet. This is still very much Queen Elizabeth II. But, oops, I've got Benjamin Bunny. So that's a limited edition of the Beatrice Potter collector 50p. It's not valuable. I mean, they've printed millions of them, but it's quite cool. I've been keeping it especially to show you. Yes, you had it in the US? Oh, cool. Yeah, I never. Well, I don't know whether we never had them in France or if it's just that my family was not reading them, but I never had them as a child. Now let me show you the gates into the catacombs. The catacombs, that was a cheaper option to be buried into the catacombs. And surprisingly not that popular. I think they have only 500 people buried in there. You can go inside, every year they have an open day. But the tours of the catacombs, they get booked up quite quickly. But I find the doors very impressive with the snakes. It's almost like Harry Potterish, like Slytherin or something. Let's see if we can see a bit of the inside. No, it's too dark. Right, let me step back so you get a better view of the door. I know some of you like your doors, so that's quite a cool door. And let's go back towards the middle. So the cemetery, when they first opened it, I think it was the second one of the Magnificent Seven after West Norwood. And it was, and Kensal Green, so it might have been the third actually. When it was first designed, this place, the Grand Circle in the middle, was not meant to be hosting burials. It was meant to be open grass. Oh, thanks, Natalie. That's very, very much appreciated. It's only much, so basically that was a commercial cemetery. We spoke about that in the past, but those little graveyards in the churchyards in the city and across London were often very much saturated. So they had to come up with those commercial Magnificent Seven, so those huge cemeteries to host the dead. And Brompton was the first one to actually be nationalized, 1850. That's why it's fairly easy for me to run a tour over here, because it's very, very well documented. And if you buy all the publications from the Friends of Brompton Cemetery, you really get a lot of information. And when it was nationalized, all this space here, they actually started to sell burial plots as well. I don't know if it's a shame or not. It would have been nice to have an open space in the middle, but space is money. And today it is managed by the Royal Park, so it is part of the Crown Estate. It's it might actually be the only one, It's one of the very few cemeteries that belong to the Crown Estate. I don't know if there are any others, maybe. And see this ugly looking building behind the trees there? That is Stamford Bridge, so that's Chelsea Football Club. Anyway, let's go and see another gentleman that's buried here. Well, technically that's not buried here, but that was once buried here because his body has been moved. It's a Native American. It's Chief Long Wolf. He was from South Dakota. He came to London because of Queen Victoria's Jubilee. They wanted to do a Buffalo Bill show, so they had some Native Americans over here in London for the show. And Chief Long Wolf, I think he died of, we believe, some kind of pneumonia. He was also buried with a little baby girl called White Star. She fell off a horse during the show as well. At the time, you know, we didn't really have the capacity to bring back the bodies, you know, on the ship all the way down to America, because they'll be decomposed by the time they got there. So the both of them were buried here, and although their bodies have been moved, later on through the 20th century, their descendants decided to bring back the bodies to South Dakota. The grave is still here. So that's why they have a wolf on the grave. That was Chief Long Wolf. And let's go to see another lady. Marquesa Louisa Casati. She was, well, some people would describe her as the Lady Gaga of the day. She was a very interesting lady at the beginning of the 20th century. She was very rich herself, from a rich family, but she didn't have any titles. And she married a marquis that had titles, but didn't have much money, although eventually they got bored of one another. She believed her body was a work of art. She inspired a lot of fashion creators, and she dressed really, really funny. She had a sense of style and fashion that was something you've never seen before. You know, she would dress up as a Fontaine, for example. Let me show you a picture of her as a Fontaine. There we go. She was very openly bisexual. I don't know whether she had many affairs with ladies, but she nearly broke up a lesbian couple in Greece because she posed naked for one of them. And she'd sometimes turn up dressed covered in blood, or she had two cheetahs, animals as pets. And she would, well, she loved animals, right? But she didn't necessarily treat them as we would today. For example, she used to slightly sedate snakes. So she would drug some snakes to have them as a necklace. So today we'll find it a bit unacceptable, really. Sometimes people bring her little... She got a few coins as well, because although she started in life very rich, she was pretty much in poverty towards the end of her life. She was often seen picking from the bins, you know, to find some feathers or whatever it might be. In Primrose Hill, I think she lived. That's a nice little sculpture they've done for her. Oh, the pine, that's me. I gave her a pine earlier because she dropped it on me. I swear she did. I was on my way down here looking for the headstone. You know, I always walk my route before the tour, you know, just to make sure I remember where the graves are. And I was just walking down that lane here, and the pine fell out down from a tree, but right in front of me, kind of like to remind me to turn, you know. I'll show you. It fell out of that pine right there. And actually, you know what, I was gonna go straight down, so that did remind me to turn, so I think she did it. Every time I come down here, I swear nature is trying to speak to me. Remember 2 years ago, that was a pistachio nut that fell down from a tree in front of me. And it was not a pistachio tree. It was just a random pistachio nut that fell down. It could have been a squirrel that picked it up from a bin, you know, but yeah. So there might be some supernatural powers in this cemetery. Right, let me concentrate, because there's another lady here I want to find. and I don't want to accidentally skip her. It's Emma Shaw. She should be here soon. She was the first lady to be buried in the cemetery, 1840. We don't know very much about her, but there she is. Not much to see, but yeah, she died in childbirth. That we know for sure. And sadly, it looks like the baby died as well. Maybe not straight away, but in the next year census, the baby was not with the daddy. You know, when I started doing those tours in cemeteries, every time I did a tour, someone would ask me in the chat, who was the first person buried there? And most of the time, I'd know the answer because I would have read it somewhere. But part of me was like, why would we care? And I found out fairly recently why we care. It's because back in the day, especially in medieval times, the first person buried in a graveyard was considered as his guardian. So they actually, sometimes they even believed it was too much of a responsibility for a human. So sometimes they'd bury a dog first. So that's why it was often very, very much recorded who was the first one, because they were considered the guardian of the cemetery. So Emma is probably the guardian of Brompton Cemetery. She probably witnesses quite a lot because at some point, especially in the 70s and stuff, the cemetery was used a lot as a pickup point. Often for gay men. Not saying it doesn't happen anymore today. It probably can sometimes, but yes, sometimes you might have some. It was the same for Abney Park, and Abney Park. It was not only gay boys. It was literally everyone. This one here, it's Robert Coombs. Same name as, you might remember Robert Coombs from, the little murderer, the teenage boy that killed his mother. The poor mother is buried at Tower Hamlets Cemetery. I told you the murder story. So completely different Robert Coombs. This one was a rower, I think. He was a competition rower. He was the fastest rowing down the Tyne, and probably the Thames as well. Right, let's go down this way. Yes, a dog is probably a better guardian anyway. Yeah. You know what, Louisa Cassetti, she's actually buried with, how do you call it? What do you say? A stuffed dog. How do you call it? Taxidermiologist. Well, the job is taxidermiology, but I don't know how you call them, those animals that have been taxidermiologist. Well, you know what I mean. Those preserved animals. Taxidermiologisted. We were talking about pickup points. The first time I came here to look, there's a murder victim right next door. You see, it looks very much like a beaten path over here. That's very much a beaten path. So I was like, ooh, let's go down here. There must be someone very interesting buried there. And look, now there's nothing. It's just a nice little spot, very much isolated. So if you wanted to do a bit of cottaging, you're good down here. Taxidermid. Taxidermid? Can you actually say that? Yeah, I think stuffed is a bit easier, but stuffed could also be a soft toy. I don't think she's buried with a soft toy. I think she's buried with the taxidermed dog. Anyway, there's not much to see, but right here you've got two murder victims that have been buried. One of them was the chaplain of the... sorry, I've done something. I've touched the screen I shouldn't have done. Cancel. Right, there we go. So one of them was a reverend. He was the chaplain of the church. Let me show you an illustration of the thing. Elias, his name was, and he had a maid, Anne Boss, and they'd been missing. But people were not really worried because Elias had some friends in Lincolnshire, so they just assumed he'd gone to Lincolnshire with his maid. And well, eventually he had 2 properties here in Chelsea, one in which he lived and the other one that he was renting. And someone came down to pick up some furniture, allegedly his nephew, and they found it a bit bizarre. And they in the kitchen they found a big box, and that's where the poor maid Anna Boss, her body was in the box. And as the police looked around, they also found the reverend that had been buried under the floorboards. So quite a violent murder, and apparently the motive was only robbery. So that's that's quite bad, just to be getting a few I don't know, furniture or money or whatever they took. But yeah, the culprit was Walter Miller. He was hanged, but he had actually tried to cheat the hangman by unaliving himself first. I have to say unaliving on YouTube, but you know what I mean. Because of that, they had actually attached him to a chair. So they had actually taken him to the hangman on a chair. So apparently he struggled because they dropped him with the chair, and he was struggling even more than when you get hanged normally. So yeah, not a good move. Now, talking about unaliving yourself, there's also a very sad story here. Again, not much to see, but there's a lady that is here, buried here. Her name was Henrietta. She was once married to an Alfred Drage, and Alfred, well, of course, was ever so sorry that she'd gone, and he was, he looked okay. He was about to remarry a few days later to a young girl called Rebecca, a beautiful young girl. And one day Alfred was, he came here in the cemetery, and that's in 1908. And out of nowhere, he removed his hat and shot himself. There were witnesses and stuff, but no one would have even imagined that he was going to do that. And apparently, he had a letter in his pocket, apologizing for his fiancée. He said that his dead wife was calling him. And there was another letter that had been dropped with a friend, and saying he was telling people that he could hear and see Henrietta calling him. So that's why he did this act of desperation. But so that's in 1908. That was the last one of a long series in the cemetery. The first one was actually in September 1888. Now, we've spoken a lot about September 1888. Nothing to do with Jack the Ripper. Absolutely nothing. It's a lady called Sarah Granville. She was a spinster. I hate that term, a spinster. Well, technically, I'm a spinster, although I never really wanted to marry a man. But, it's horrible. But anyway, she was described as a spinster, so she'd never married. And she was found dead in the cemetery with 4 bottles of laudanum. So laudanum it's a drug that they'd use a lot in Victorian times. It was a painkiller, but she had gone to 4 different chemists to buy 4 bottles. That was enough to kill like 5 people anyway. And the other was about 400 yards from her parents' grave. So it was fairly obvious that she had drunk it herself. A few years later, in 1892, there were 4 young girls that came about 7 p.m. They wanted to drop some flowers in their aunt's grave. Well, 2 of them were sisters. The two others were friends. The gatekeeper he should have said no, but you know, he let them go because the cemetery was already closed. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a gunshot. One of them was killed. She didn't realize straight away that she had been shot, so they kind of run away, and eventually they found the body of a James Broswell. We don't know why. We don't know his motive. He had also shot himself. So he had killed the young girl and shot himself. Probably for absolutely no reason that would make sense to a sane person. But yeah, quite sad. And there was another one. There was a young actor that was walking along the cemetery, rehearsing his lines. He had a show at the Vaudeville Theatre in 1898, so only 10 years after the first event. And he ran into a man. He didn't think much of it, and then he heard a gunshot. And same, the man had shot himself in the head. He had a letter on his body apologizing to the coroner, would you believe? Apologizing to the coroner for giving him some work, basically. So he was also missing his dead wife. So that's interesting. There's no, as far as I know, we haven't had any more after those 30 years of unaliving themselves in the cemetery. There was a lady that dropped dead a few years later, but that's not, as far as we know, it's not suicide. Oh, I didn't want to say it. Oh, it's difficult with YouTube. You know, you have those terms that kind of trigger the algorithms. When you are a small channel, it doesn't really do much, but you can. Well, if they hear the term, then they have to put all those stuff, you know, and sometimes you get demonetized. So that's why I'm trying not to say it, but it's very difficult to not actually say what you mean to say. Anyway, let's move on from the unaliving and let's go down to see a little princess. So another very interesting lady. She was a little princess from India, from the Kingdom of Coorg. You might know Queen Victoria. She often, well, you know, when the British Empire was in charge of India, they kind of took away those young princes and princesses to take them down to England, to convert them into Catholicism. So little Princess Victoria Guruma was one of them. So she was not allowed to speak to her dad again. She was taken down to England, and she was given a grace of favor apartment. So those were those apartments that were, they belonged to the Queen, and sometimes some people could live there for free. Little Victoria was taken, she was 11 years old when she was taken down to England. They actually tried to play Cupid and match her with Dulip Singh. Dulip Singh was a little boy that was taken also, a little Indian prince. Indian, actually it might have been Pakistan for Dulip, but I mean Pakistan today. You know, he's the one from the Kohinoor diamond. You know, at the time, Queen Victoria would, well, people would come and take those little princes and princesses with all their jewelry, and they'll be like, oh, that's nice. You give it to the Queen, right? You give it to the Queen? Yeah, of course, you give it to the Queen. And then they'll take the diamond. So that's a bit of a controversial one today. And they actually tried to pair little Victoria to match her with Dulip, but they didn't fancy each other. Victoria ended up marrying an army colonel that was 30 years her senior. And let me show you her photo. Where is Victoria? There she is. So that's little Victoria. Sadly, her husband wasn't really good to her. He neglected her. She doesn't look very happy on the picture, and she was not happy. She had tried to escape a few times, but bear in mind they were hardly ever smiling on Victorian photography because the exposure was so long. you know, it would take 10 minutes, you know, I don't know, maybe not 10, but at least 2 minutes of exposure. So you couldn't really hold a smile for that long. So they often look a bit sad or grumpy on Victorian photography. Generally, it doesn't mean they are, but in the case of little Victoria, she probably was anyway. Some of those Indian princes and princesses went on to have a very interesting life in the UK. Some of you might remember we talked about Sophia Duleep Singh, so the daughter of Duleep Singh. She became a suffragette. And she was so famous because she was in all the, you know, the tabloids of the days and stuff. So the police didn't really want to arrest her, you know, at Black Friday. Black Friday was the big protest through the suffragettes movement that became very violent between the police and the suffragettes. Sophia, by the way, a little fun fact, she was one of the first ladies to be publicly seen on a bicycle, because at the time they believed that bicycles were, for ladies, they were anatomically exciting, which sounds a bit ridiculous today, but yeah, Sophia didn't care. She would go on a bicycle in front of everyone, and she was flyering for the suffragettes and everything. By the way, little question for you. You know, like just now, I've just shown you a picture of little Victoria. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you care about the pictures? Because from next month, from the 7th of July, Prism Live Studio is gonna charge for some features. I'm not sure which one, so I'm not sure whether I'm gonna still be able to show you pictures. Do you think we need them? Like, do you think you really needed to see our face right now? Or do you think it's a nice little bonus, but really it doesn't matter? Let me know in the chat on a scale from 1 to 10. Technically, I could still go back to the old style, you know, when I used to show you pictures on a different phone. The quality wouldn't be as good because of the lighting and stuff, but because yeah, if they were to remove that very feature, I don't know whether I'd want to pay, because it's like, it's $10 a month, which might not seem much, but you know, the tips have gone down a little bit lately, so I don't really want to invest too much into the streaming process. You don't worry about the photos. Caroline says 8. You can look her up later. Cheryl says 1. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Then I probably well, the thing is, sometimes it's good to show you little videos as well, you know, if there's somewhere I cannot go in terms of signal. But it's good to know if you don't care too much. 8. Yes, you can Google them. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure yet. I don't know yet for sure whether it is gonna be one of the features that's gonna go away. We might be lucky, because Prism is really a lot of, it's for streamers, you know, video game streamers. So I'm hoping they'll remove some of their features and not mine, but we'll see, we'll see. For me, they're very handy when I do the Monopoly tours, because I need to show you the stuff, the pictures of the inside and stuff. But to be honest, those Monopoly tours are not massively successful anyway, so you enjoy them, but yeah, cool. Well, thank you guys. Let's move on. I'll show you a murder location. Well, actually, a double murder location. But look, first we've got those coal covers here. You remember those were to drop the coal in the little cellar they have in under the pavement in those Victorian buildings. Now, I'll show you the building, and then I'll tell you the stories as we go, because I don't like to stand too long in front of people's accommodation. You know, sometimes they don't know they live in a murder location, so you probably don't want them to know. It is this, well, little disclaimer, If there's, I don't think there's been any, but sometimes I'm not always aware if there's been any renumbering of the street. I don't think there were. So it's at number 13 here and number 17. Number 13 is this one here. Number 17 is, I believe, this one. So two very tragic murders, 2 doors down from one another, really. And guess what? There's a 1-bedroom apartment to rent. It's somewhere in that block. I'm not sure if it's at number 17 or if it's next door. Let me show you the inside. How much would you pay as a monthly rent for a 2-bedroom apartment up here? Bearing in mind we are in Chelsea, so it's gonna be fairly pricey. How much do you think that'll cost? A 1-bedroom apartment for a monthly rent in a lovely Victorian. I don't know if that's Victorian actually, it might be Georgian. How much would you pay monthly? To live in a murder location. It's not a very, very infamous murder, so I'm guessing the tenants don't know. Nothing like a lady under your window shouting about murder. Well, exactly. 1K. Ooh, Patricia, you know what? You're the closest so far. I think you're pretty much spot on, actually. Let me show you the answer. So yeah, very close, Trish, very close. 2,150. So 2K, very well done, Ronnie, spot on, actually. Cool, let's go. So there were two murders, quite similar to one another actually, but very different period. One was 1922, one is 1946. At number 13, there was in the basement there was a lady that lived there. Her name was Gertrude. Gertrude was she was a sex worker, but kind of high-hand sex worker. You know what they call the call girl. She lived in her basement. She had a maid, and she would. So you know those call girls, they'll take customers, right? But only fairly wealthy gentlemen, not anyone, you know. And they'll be taken on a date. They'll be taken to, I don't know, the cinema or whatever it might be. It was not only sex. It was company and sex. Like today we'd call them an escort, really. And she was a lady with no issue. I mean, everyone liked her, as far as we knew, at least. And what happened is that she met a client called Major Ronald True, and he had been into aviation. You know, that was the beginning of aviation. So he was a pilot. He had allegedly had a couple of crashes. That's how he broke his jaw. So he had a bit of a funny voice, and he had actually been diagnosed with some kind of a double personality disorder. Obviously, poor little Gertrude had no idea. He introduced himself as a major in the army, and he behaved like a gentleman. The first time they met, they went on a date, and then they came back to hers in the basement there for sex. And in the morning, he left, but he did not pay her. And not only had he not paid her, but he had also stolen £5 from her. At the time, that was a lot of money. That was like nearly 400 quid in today's money. But there was not much Gertrude could do, let's cross. Because of course she was a sex worker. What was she gonna do? She wasn't gonna go and tell the police, was she? And she wanted nothing to do with him. And she moved on, you know. And she just moved on. But very soon after, he started to stalk her. there was a guy allegedly called Mr. Armstrong that started ringing her, but she knew it was Major True because the voice was very, very typical. And she told her maid, I'm scared of him, I don't want to see him. She started to try avoiding him, actually. She started to avoid being at home, and the Major was always there. He'd hire a car because he wouldn't take public transport, and he'll hang around the flat and everything. And one night, she turns up at 11, and he was there. We don't really know, we don't know whether she was just too polite to say no, but she took him in. Big mistake. The next morning, the maid arrived. She usually arrived about 9 a.m. She'd usually go down to the kitchen and cook breakfast and then come and wake up her mistress. As the maid, Emily, came in, she noticed a jacket in the living room. So Gertrude would be still with a customer. That was fine. That was quite often. And at that point, Major True came out, and she's like, "Oh, hello, you again." She made him a tea. He had a tea, and he said to the maid, "Don't wake her up. We've had a big night. Let her sleep." And then off he went. And well, eventually the maid had to wake up her mistress because she knew she had plans for the day. And when she went to wake her, well, she was not on the bed. Actually, there were a few pillows pretending to have to cover to make the shape of a body in the bed. And she found her mistress' body in the bathroom. She had been brutally attacked with a pastry roller or whatever you call it, and then strangled. So brutal attack, and that would have been done right before he left. So when he went for tea with the maid, she probably was there struggling in the basement bathroom, and she'd just died. Major True allegedly. He said he was stalked by his alter ego, and he was actually judged insane. He had some kind of a double or actually triple personality disorder. He was convinced that he had seen another Major True attacking Gertrude. So yeah, he was judged insane, and he went to Broadmoor. So he wasn't fit to be trialed. Yeah, exactly, Caroline. A holding pen. That's the term I was looking for. Thank you. And the other murder, it's quite sad as well. About 5:40 a.m. I think it was. Well, it's not here, but it's kind of like the same. You've got the little balcony above and the little railings here. There was a gentleman going to work, when he saw a mannequin, like what looked like a mannequin with the foot on the railing there. So he got a bit closer, and he realized it was not a mannequin at all. It was a lady with a red dress, no shoes, a dead body. So of course the police was called and everything. All the neighbors came out and started gossiping. Well, all but one. Now, the police at first imagined that someone must have dumped the body from somewhere else, or there might have been a car accident and the body might have just ended up there on the railings. No murderer would be stupid enough to dump a body from the balcony, right? You wouldn't dump a body on your doorstep, would you? Well, they found out that she had actually died 4 days earlier. She'd been missing for 4 days. It was a lady known as Virginia. She was also a sex worker. She lived in Camberwell, so that's where I live. Her actual name was Winifred, but her second name was Virginia. She went under the name of Virginia. In her 20s as well. And she also had another job as a waitress, well, The police went to ask the neighbors, you know, about anything they would have seen or witnessed. Every other neighbor anyway was already on the street gossiping. And when they knocked at the door on the first floor apartment, so exactly 15 feet above the body, exactly the perfect fall in terms of the direction of the fall and everything. He opened the door, he's like, oh, are you here for the murder? And they were like, what murder? The one downstairs. How do you know, you know? And very quickly they were not satisfied with his answers. They went into the living room and they found in the fireplace a pair of red shoes that had been badly burned. He had an answer for everything. He said, yeah, that's from my ex-wife. She passed away a few months ago. Then they went on the balcony and there were a few droplets of blood, dry blood. He was like, yeah, that's also from my ex-wife. She died of tuberculosis and she used to have some nosebleeds or whatever. And then they went into the bedroom. The bedroom was actually not connected to the living room. They'll have to go back into the hallway because it had been badly subdivided. And then again, there was blood on the bed, at the foot of the bed. And again, it's from his dead wife or from his nosebleed or whatever. And very often, very quickly, they decided to take him down to the police station. And he was, no surprise, guilty. He had killed her a few days earlier and he had just dumped the body after 4 days, literally in front of his own flat, which it's not the sharpest thing to do. And he tried to claim that they had met, they had had sex, and then she had stolen 9 pounds from him. Very unlikely, you know, she didn't have I'm never going to be able to cross here. She didn't have the reputation of ever stealing from any of our customers, and it's probably the other way around. He probably noticed that she had some money in her shoes or something, and he probably stole it from her. And so yeah, another sad story, literally 2 doors down from the other murder. Right, whenever I'm able to cross, which is not soon, I'll show you a little surprise over here, and then that's gonna be the end of the tour. Right, it looks like I might get a chance. Let's go. Right, this is a Banksy. Fairly new Banksy, you know, some of you might remember there was, I want to say about 8 months ago now, maybe a year ago, you might remember for about a week, Banksy published on his Instagram 1 animal a day in London, on Greater London. I'll show you. So that's the pictures from his Instagram. So those elephants were the second one, I think, after the little goat. So every day you'd have a new animal. And some of you might remember because I went to visit the rhino and I did a little YouTube short. And as I was there filming, the security actually placed a container to cover the rhino. Because the thing with Banksy is that it's street art that cannot be on the street for too long because it's so valuable. Like a piece like this, it's probably at least £200,000. Let me remove those ones. And the last one, there was a series of, I don't know, I think 7. The last one was this one here, on the shutter at the London Zoo, which is quite funny because quite clearly, I mean, the message is quite clear to me. It's against animals in captivity, right? So all week we were wondering, what are those animals? You know, what's the message? Because Banksy is often very political or very philosophical now. You might have seen last week, there's been a new one in Marseille that's actually quite philosophical. But there's always a message, you know, so with those animals, we were like, what's the message? And with the last one at the London Zoo, it was Tish is saying, amazing, it hasn't been defaced. You know what, it has been actually. When I first came to see it, about a week after the elephants were stenciled, they had been defaced with some white lines. but someone, I don't know if it's Banksy himself, but someone came up to remove the white. And it's probably window tax, you know, those windows. Not sure, because sometimes they also do those fake window tax windows, but probably the case. Anyway, so yeah, with the zoo, for me the message was quite clear. It's that the full series was against animals in captivity. But very ironically, I saw an interview of the director of the London Zoo. He was on camera and he was saying, "Oh, we're so glad to have a Banksy. It's such an amazing illustration. Banksy," oh, I'm gonna move away from the music because I don't want any copyright claims. So yeah, he's like, it's so lovely. Those animals are the gorilla. Let me show you again. Where are we? Yeah, the gorilla is coming to lift the shutter so the animals of the zoo can go for a night out in Camden and come back in the morning. Yeah, right. He was clearly ignoring Banksy's message. I mean, it's quite clear that Banksy was somehow against the zoo, maybe not the London Zoo in particular, but all those institutions with animals in captivity. And the management of the zoo wanted to completely ignore it and say thank you to Banksy for the lovely piece of the animals coming out for a few hours. Anyway, let me remove this one. You wonder how much is a Banksy on a property? I think it varies, you know, it would have to be auctioned really, but yeah, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds nowadays. So that's why it's a bit ironical really, because it's street art, but it cannot be on the street. All those animals, I tried to see every single one of them. Most of them 2 days later were already removed, covered or vandalized. I've seen the monkeys. They were covered for a while. They've pretty much gone now. You can still see the shape of them, but they're gone. I've seen the rhino. That's when they put the thing to cover it. I tried to see the fishes. You know, the police officers with the fishes. That was like 2 days later. They had already removed the full police box to put it in a safe place. And the goat is gone as well. I've seen I'll show you again because I'm talking about stuff you cannot see. I've seen the fish and chips, that's in Walthamstow. The one with the wolf on the moon, that's on a satellite TV thing that was stolen 2 days later. And the cat, I think the cat was gone as well very quickly. So none of them, apart from the elephant and potentially the birds at the fish bar, yeah, none of them are still there. So, you know, it really doesn't last very long with a Banksy, sadly. Yeah, Cheryl, I don't want to speculate too much, but yeah, I don't believe that Banksy still comes himself to do. He designed them at home, yeah, I have no doubt about that, but I don't know whether he's coming himself to paint it. And actually, if you look at this one, let me show you again. In terms of the painting work, it's not the best quality. I mean, there's a few droplets under the trunks of the elephant. It's not, I mean, for a stencil, it's not hugely precise. So yeah, it could actually be a collective of artists that he could design them at home and then have someone going to do the groundwork. I mean, Banksy is amazing. He's done some amazing art, but let's not forget that in the 90s, he was hugely inspired by a French artist called Blake Laura. You know, in the world of art, the border between copying and being inspired, it's a very fine line, isn't it? And you know, in the 90s, before Instagram and everything, it was fairly easy to, when I say copy, you know, to get very heavily inspired by another artist. And some of the rats Banksy used to do in his early days in Bristol and London, they were very, very similar to some of Blake Laura's artwork. So yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me show you my face again. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before we go. If not, thank you very much for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you along with me. If you want to see a bit more of me, we're going to France in about 10 days now. So I'm taking you to Marseille and Saint-Tropez. So make sure you hit the bell to make sure you don't miss the live. If any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that far into the video or into the live stream, I hope you'll subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on the fun next time, because it's much more fun to be live in the chat and be able to interact rather than watching the replay in the next few weeks or months. So make sure you subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of that. And thank you for coming today. For any of you that left me a little tip on YouTube or on PayPal or on Buy Me a Coffee, it is very much appreciated. It is thanks to your generosity that I can keep going, you know, create some new tours and take you to exciting places. So so thank you very much for your donations. And I don't see any questions, so thank you Tish, thank you Emma, thank you Ronnie, thanks Sun, thanks everyone for coming today. Hopefully I'll see some of you in Saint-Tropez and in Marseille, and have a great evening or a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Bye bye. Oops. There we go. Bye.